Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Unit Masters session 11. So we are in the final week of our 6 weeks Masters program, and today we have the honor of having Michael with us to share about his story as a founder of Unit and also the vision of Unit, and then we open up for Q&A. So this is kind of the Ask Me Anything session with Michael. So any questions you have about Unit, about the token-driven economy, about his life as an entrepreneur, you're open to ask them in the chat, and then Michael will answer them in his flow. Thanks very much, Michael.
Amazing. Thanks for the kind introduction. Yep. Really happy to be here. It's the final week of our fourth master's batch, and really grateful for everyone who's spoken at this master's program and everyone who's attended the different sessions. So as Yip mentioned, we'll be starting off today by giving a background of myself, how I started as an entrepreneur, as an investor, and in the crypto space. We're going to be following that up by introducing about Unit, what our motivation is with Unit, why we started it, what we want to improve in the world in the future to come with Unit, and then be answering some questions. So a little bit about myself. So I'm half Singapore and half British. I grew up in Singapore till I was 15, and then I went to high school in the UK, and been building different mobile applications since I was 12. I always wanted to learn how, always enjoyed building things. And the really cool thing about software and coding is that you're able to create or build something without needing a lot of money, without needing anyone's permission. If you wanted to open up a restaurant, you want to open up a traditional business, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of money needed to get it off the ground. You need to sort of convince people to finance it. You need to convince people to give you a space, stuff like this. And the cool thing about software I found since I started building apps was you just needed to write some code, put it out there, and people would start using it if they really enjoyed it. So I used to read computer programming books and started off building websites to begin with for people to read different content. Started a popular snowboard website, built a book reader where people could add in different books and keep track of their progress of reading books. Built a social network in the UK with a few million users, and yeah, I guess starting in 2010, I was in Singapore. I was really fascinated by peer-to-peer applications. So the idea that an application like Facebook or Zoom or WhatsApp or Google, you rely on central entities. You rely on a startup or a company, and you're sort of entrusting them with your data, or hoping that they're going to do good. They're going to, like Google said, don't be evil. And I built this video conferencing app, and the underlying premise of it, like the idea of it, was doing encrypted video calling where you didn't have to rely on a central party. So if like what we're using now, Zoom, Skype, was all going through a central server. And I was really fascinated by the idea of if I wanted to have a call with you, not maybe using a central server to set up our call, but once a call had been established, you'll be able to have an encrypted video call directly. So this was my introduction to the decentralized peer-to-peer space. Shortly after I started this, so this was early 2010. In late 2010, I stumbled upon the WikiLeaks project. I was always a big believer in transparency and governments being improved, and also I was a bit shocked by what was released in 2009, with the WikiLeaks organization showing what was happening in the Middle East. And I volunteered myself as a developer. I built the Android app, and that was my introduction to Bitcoin. I was very intrigued by since I was building peer-to-peer video conferencing, Bitcoin was peer-to-peer money. Found this project super amazing, and was fortunate to lead the fundraising using Bitcoin back then in 2010. The government had frozen our Visa, MasterCard, PayPal donation streams, so fortunately Bitcoin was an avenue to keep the organization running. And back then, it's really hard to see a future where, Bitcoin would go to $10 to $50 to 100 to $1,000 or 10,000, or now it's what, 30, 40,000, right? So like back then, it was 10 Bitcoin for $1, or like under $1 Bitcoin. And to see it go from where it was then to where it is now, and to have still very little day-to-day usage of it. So if you ask people, who are diehard crypto believers or users or traders, like what have they actually used decentralized money or peer-to-peer like tokens, Bitcoin, Ethereum, what have they actually used for it on a day-to-day basis? It's still very little. You ask like, when was the last time you actually, apart from traded your cryptocurrencies and digital assets, actually bought something of it? It's very little. So now, Bitcoin's at $30,000. The whole ecosystem, the whole crypto space, $1.5 trillion, or below 2 trillion, above a trillion, about that. It's hard to see a future where, one Bitcoin is worth $10 million each, or it's kind of hard to believe like the digital asset ecosystem is going to be worth $200 trillion, to go like 200 times what it is now. When it seems quite big now, to have Bitcoin go 1,000 times bigger, or to have the whole digital asset space go, 100 or 1,000 times bigger. It might seem quite unfathomable, but like, I guess us at Unit, we have no doubt in the future of this space growing. The same way, in terms of my story, I was also an early iOS developer, so I built like some of the first Android apps and the first iPhone apps on the store. And it was really hard back then, like when the iPhone App Store was released, people didn't really see the potential of mobile. For instance, Facebook, they just wrote off mobile. They didn't even build an iPhone app in the first 3 years. Like they thought mobile was a big focus, and that almost killed them. It almost made them go away. Like when Instagram was bought by Facebook in 2012 for $1 billion, people were thinking like, why is this photo sharing app, which is 18 months old, less than 2 years, being bought for $1 billion? Like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any money. People are just posting pictures. Like, why is this? Like, why would Facebook pay so much for this iPhone and Android? And I suppose, the rationale behind that is similar to, the internet, the mobile phone, and where we are with crypto tokens at the moment. So many finance people, so many business people, experts in different fields, they completely write off tokenization or cryptocurrencies or the blockchain as a technology or as a tool for what can be done in the future. And I'm super confident that, this technology change is going to cause more good and efficiency and productivity and opportunity for the world than the mobile phone and the internet. And the reason why is because the mobile phone did amazing good with communication. Before the mobile phone, if you were due to meet a friend for lunch, you would have to hope that when you call them up, they would pick up at the same time. You have to, and if you didn't show up within 20 minutes of when you arrived, they probably won't be there. And now, with a mobile phone, you can talk to someone on the other side of the world, and it's seamless. With the internet, it's the same with information. If you wanted to learn something about a topic, you won't even be able to order a book online. You have to go to a bookshop, you have to go to a library, you have to talk to an expert, and it's really cumbersome. And now with the internet, you have information at the palm of your fingertips. And the really cool thing about tokens and cryptocurrencies and digital assets is it's going to allow value and opportunities to flow much more fluidly around society. So, when I first came to London, I was fortunate enough to work at a fund, like an investment fund, a venture fund. I can maybe share a little bit about the story of how I ended up there. But what it taught me was that, now the way money and finance work isn't as equitable, or it isn't as free as how information is very free at the moment, or the same way communication is very free. A very small portion of society, can pool together $100,000. So if let's say the average person wanted to open up a small business and they need $100,000, it would be very, very hard for them to do so. And the really cool thing about tokens is it really just allows for the democratization of value. So like when I worked for this venture fund in London, we would invest in 10 deals out of 3,000 deals coming in every year. So that's like 2,900 people who tried to raise maybe a small amount of money, like a seed round for their tech idea, and they were basically told, nope, we only focus on these number of deals a year, and they're going to be really big, and the rest, we don't have time to deal with that. We're focused on a few small bets which are going to become really big and pay off the whole fund. And I suppose what we're doing with Unit. So like, what is our mission? So we basically imagine a society where the idea of value or money or ownership is completely different to how it is now. So, we're using, a tech platform to have this call, and all of us, we're instrumental to the value of this, $100 billion project Zoom. But, it's very common that we use things and we're not owners of it at the moment. The restaurant you had dinner at yesterday evening, the email service that you use, the computer that you're using, you might own that product, but you don't own the entity that you helped you help create. Without you as a customer, or if you're an employee working as a, like in an organization, like typically you don't have any ownership of that organization. And like same way, you look back 15 years ago and people would struggle to spend a day without their smartphone. Go back 30 years ago, before the internet, like people used to live without the internet, and it's like, wow, like without Wi-Fi, without the internet. So we strongly believe, this decade, 5-6 years away, if a project doesn't have a token, or if someone works for a project which they don't own a piece of, it's going to be very unusual. And if you try to raise money without a token, if you wanted to publicize or promote a project which doesn't have a token, it's just going to seem very weird. It's similar to a retail business not having an online presence, not sharing on social media, not having people order stuff. And us at Unit, the same way Facebook kind of provided social networking to the masses. Before Facebook, there was dozens of social networks, and Facebook kind of pioneered what the mainstream social network looked like. Or the same way, the iPhone took smartphones mainstream. Before the smartphone, some people had Blackberries, some people had Nokia's, some people like the iPhone was really the first smartphone that made the person in a small village be able to benefit from a smartphone and drive the cost of innovation down. So the way we look at the crypto space at the moment, there's about 8,000 tokens. Most of them are not very useful and entirely speculatively priced. We believe that we can provide a easy way to create tokens and build communities around a token, and basically mobilize and incentivize people to work together and be more cooperative. And how do we intend on doing that? So our strategy, so we have basically the Unit ecosystem, and grateful for everyone here to be part of the Unit ecosystem. This is what we believe is going to be the infrastructure, the engine that's powering the society in the future. It's kind of like the base layer. It's kind of like the internet. And then we kind of looked 5 years into the future, and we said, okay, in 5 years, like what are going to be the biggest tokens in the world? Is it going to be Bitcoin? Is it going to be Ethereum? Is it going to be Litecoin? Is it going to be Polkadot? Is it going to be Cardano? Like, what is it going to be? And we thought, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, these are all communities. They're people who believe in this digital asset and building on it. But all of this technology layer is going to become commoditized. And what that means is it's not going to matter which infrastructure you issue your token on. It's not going to matter which technology is built on. It's the same as asking which coding language did you use to build your website. Nobody ever asked that. All that matters is the website looks good and it functions well. So we said, okay, in the future, the biggest tokens are going to be industry tokens and city tokens. Industries like the real estate industry, the art industry, the music industry, the fashion industry. Like, these are industry tokens. And cities, so cities like London or Dubai or New York or Shanghai or Singapore or Buenos Aires. So I guess we're building up really strong teams of leading investors and entrepreneurs and influencers for different cities and different industries, and building up these microeconomies. So if you think about Unit as being the infrastructure for the entire global token economy, and then if you slice it up into smaller chunks, then you've got industries, and then you've got cities, and then within these industries and within these cities, you've got even smaller tokens like communities, you've got businesses, you've got people, you have different projects, and I guess that's our 3-year, 4-year, 5-year plan to tokenizing the world. And why do we believe so much in the power of community and education? So with regards to community, we think that the reason why things succeed is a result of really strong community. So you might have the best product, you might have the best technology, you might have the best infrastructure, you might have you might have everything, but if you don't have a strong community that really cares about what you're doing, and you don't have a team that is like a family and synergized in building up this product or business, then it's going to be really tough to thrive and succeed. Right? You've seen now that businesses are trying to fake having a community or trying to build a community, and it's actually much tougher than people think. And we believe that by giving people a sense of ownership and actual ownership in things like projects or businesses through a form of a token, that's going to allow this community to form and thrive. And I guess that's an insight. So what do our next steps look like? So now our unit system is going live. It basically allows you to issue a token and provides a number of really powerful features for your token to succeed. So maybe I can touch on two really strong innovations. One innovation is the idea of a treasury. So if you look at cryptocurrencies tokens at the moment, and you spoke to a very serious investor in the venture capital world, or on Wall Street, or in the city of London, and you told them, hey, what do you think about cryptocurrencies? A lot of them will think it's ridiculous. It's like a Ponzi scheme. Like, they have no clue what they're buying. They think it's going to disappear in the future. And part of the reason why they don't believe in it is because largely at the moment, digital assets and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are entirely driven by speculative value. This means that, if tomorrow, 5 million people started buying Bitcoin or started buying this coin, it would just increase in value, just because an amount, sheer response is the number of people buying it, and the limited number of people selling it, it speculatively goes up in value. However, the underlying value of it is very hard to calculate. Like, if tomorrow Bitcoin goes from 30,000-40,000 to 300,000-400,000 or $1 million, people can try and evaluate and go, okay, quantitatively what has changed? More people have bought it, but it's hard to value it like a traditional business, which has a PE ratio, like how much profit it makes, or underlying assets or customers. It's very hard with Bitcoin. And what we've introduced with Unit is this idea of a treasury. Basically, if I had a Michael token, or Adrian or Ethan or Anne has their own personal tokens, you can basically look at any token and look in the treasury and go, how much underlying assets does this token have? In the worst case scenario, if nobody buys this token, what is it going to be worth? And we think that this innovation is as groundbreaking as the innovation of Bitcoin with like unstoppable peer-to-peer money. Like, we think that what we're doing with Unit, with the treasury, wouldn't have been possible without something like Bitcoin, or without Ethereum, or without existing coins before it, so that these coins can sit in the Unit treasury or the tokenization of Unit. And we think it's going to do so much good and change for the world. It basically gives a strong underlying value to any form of token. And another really cool innovation, so like with Unit, anyone who creates a token, they can access, they can see a leaderboard of who the biggest holders are. They can create a contest. They can organize events for their token economy, their token ecosystem. They can also exchange the token. So these are a number of really cool features that Unit provides. Maybe I can open up to some questions if anyone in the audience has any thoughts or feedback or questions. Happy to answer or address these, and also would love to maybe talk about our plan with our master's program, where we're moving forward with this, and the different conferences that we're rolling out. Very cool. What's the importance of community for Unit, and how can we stay connected? So this is a great point from Myra. So I guess the importance of community for Unit is that, we think of any business, token, project as a community. And if a business doesn't have a community, then, it is, or it's entirely owned by one person or 3 people, that is their community. Like, that is an effective way to track the community. And most people think about community buildings as building up their social media or organizing events. And we think that the evolution of community is cooperative ownership, where the customers and the employees are able to buy a piece of it and feel that, similar to how I suppose a very similar analogy to this idea of tokens and cooperative ownership is nationality. A lot of people feel a strong sense of attachment to, being French, or being Swiss, or being American, or being Brazilian, or Costa Rican, and we think that in the future this idea of nationality is going to become commoditized. Like now there's only 200 countries or nations in the world. Like we're creating a society with Unit where there's going to be 200 million countries or entities which behave like countries, where even the idea of a restaurant, the idea of a nightclub is its own country or its own ecosystem. And you can see a population, like the census is done in real time. You can basically see how many token holders there are. So you're going to be able to hold different tokens and coins, and effectively you're a citizen of many different micro ecosystems. And we have no doubt this is going to happen in the next 10 years. It's going to transform the world the same way. It's going to transform the world the same way the internet transformed like digesting information or reading newspapers. It's hard to see a future 15 years ago when your newspaper that always got delivered wouldn't be the case. And now the last time you saw a newspaper was probably not, like, quite a long time ago. So the way banks and governments kind of operate, it's hard to see a future where they become less powerful and relevant. But we believe that through tokens and the token economy, this is going to become a natural phase where governments and banks and financial institutions are going to have to compete against more real projects and things which generate real day-to-day value. So I have a question here from Enrico. Michael, among your verticals, do you think that early age education can be one? Yep, so that's a great one. So at the moment, we have identified 50 industries and 50 cities. They're focused on industries and cities which we feel to have a big enough population, big enough market capitalization. So if you think about the 200 biggest countries, there's going to be a few like the United States, India, China, Indonesia, which are like relatively big geographic regions. So we've thought that, okay, things like the United States, things like China, things like Indonesia are still too spread out. So that's why we're focused on individual cities, which have a very tight cluster of people, as well as industries where people can generally be united by a particular area of research or particular thing that they believe, like music or art or real estate or cars or software development. So in terms of answering your question, early age education, so we have one for education, that's our Learn token. So I suppose we've bundled that up together, early age education and a later stage. Question from Anchor, right? Great concept, but how do you think regulators and governments and can make it difficult for tokenization of communities and businesses? Yep, absolutely agree that. So regulators and governments, they can make it really difficult by just providing archaic laws. If you look at countries like Singapore, they've both with more than 30,000 monthly active users. So governments which don't want internet businesses to succeed, they can make it extremely difficult to succeed. But I guess the interesting thing about big assets is that it's very hard to shut it down. So similar to when the Pirate Bay launched, and they were very soon after shut down, they just spawned hundreds of others. Or Napster, they shut down Napster, and it's very hard to kill something which is effectively better. And then maybe it provides a solution where it doesn't necessarily distribute content and not reward the content creators, but it does so in a way which is slightly better than what was before. Because the issue with, as you mentioned, governments or regulators or banks is that they're very slow. When Napster and Rhapsody tried to work with the music industry, and even if they tried to, the music industry said, we're very comfortable selling CDs, we're making a lot of money here, we do not want to change. So that's the way, I guess, governments and banks and regulators, financial institutions look at digital assets or tokenization at the moment. They think, what this stuff is so new, very few people use it. I spoke with the CTO of Amazon in 2018, and I asked him, what do you think about decentralized storage? I've known him for since 2014 through the DLD community, and I said, hey, what do you think about like things like Filecoin or things like Chia network? Like, instead of keeping files and storing data in something like Amazon Web Services, or Dropbox, what do you think about ones where the community owns it, or the idea that it's not a single company that can just delete all your files. And he said, all of these new technologies, even though Filecoin had raised, a few $100 million that year in 2017, he kind of said, the amount of people who actually use it, or how few people are actually working on it relative to Dropbox or Amazon Web Services, it's highly unlikely these things will take off. So I think a lot of people who are leaders in different industries now, or people who are running things which are powering the world, they don't see how fast it can be disrupted. If you were the head of the New York Times, and people were telling people who ran newspapers, like, what do you think about moving to an online subscription business? And they were like, no, it doesn't make sense. But then, when it's too late, then they need to finally react to it. Question here from Anne: if someone is super new to the crypto world and has not bought any Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any crypto, can they still get started using Unit as a platform to fund their ideas? Yes, most definitely. So, the same way before website builders were created, it used to be really hard to build a website. You need to hire a coder. It costs a lot of money. You need to find your own server to store the website, to host the website. And then, website builders like Wix or Webs or Squarespace made it really easy to launch a website for $10 a month or less, or even free. We do that for tokens. So like we basically realized that now making a token is very hard to do well. A lot of people know nothing about it, and it's very hard to grow it. And we basically want to provide the community, we want to provide the technology, and provide the right metrics by which people can create successful digital tokens to moving towards this token economy. Question here from Yip: you've been working on Unit since 2016. What's been your happiest moments along the journey so far? So I think some of my happiest moments are the conferences that we've organized. So last year we hosted, several 24-hour forums where we had, hundreds of speakers presenting on a wide range of topics. And this was during the lockdown, so people were, and this was before Clubhouse was invented, or before many of the online conferences. We were one of the first online events. And I remember 4 months before that, before COVID, I was asking like, hey, we want to scale. I was asking a friend who's a business person in Hong Kong, and I said, hey, we've done Unit conferences live in about 25 cities. What do you think about doing it online? And he basically said, it's impossible. Like, the idea of doing online events, people don't want to be looking at their computer. People want to be meeting in person, and yeah, just online conferences will never take off. So it's really nice, the idea of having, thousands of people attend our online Unit conferences, and it was organized with 2 or 3 weeks of notice. So it's really, that was a really happy moment. Other happy moments are, I guess, seeing our master's program take off. Like, it was started late last year, and it's really grown and materialized quite nicely. We've had some of the leaders in the digital asset and the cryptocurrency and the blockchain world and business world present, and I'm really excited because I strongly see the future of it. Like, the idea that higher education and is really planting the seeds for something that can really disrupt how education and access to super super high achievers and people who are visionary in different fields can share their insights and thoughts on how they're creating the future of society. Question from Natalia: what is valued by Unit community across the board? I guess in terms of what's valued, maybe what's our values, we value transparency, we value equity. So a lot of people talk about equality. So we think that equality is a bit tough to achieve. We think equity. So not necessarily making everyone on the same playing field, which is like, I guess, the idea of communism or socialism. We believe in equity. So the idea that, it's okay to make the rich richer as long as you pull everyone else up to a really nice base. And we value transparency. So the idea that, if you end up in a society where, you don't have to trust Google not to be evil, you can create a society where they can't be evil because everything's just so transparent. If they try to be evil, it just wouldn't work, or it's just not possible because all the code is on the blockchain. It just can't be changed. Another question here, really cool, from Natalia: what metrics is the leaderboard going to be based on? So in this case, the leaderboard is very transparent in giving the token ownership. So You know, now if you wanted to see who the owners are of different companies or different restaurants or different businesses, it's completely opaque. You know, you can ask someone who, you know, started one of the co-founders of it, hey, who are your shareholders? You know, and you kind of have to trust them that they say, okay, these are the different shareholders of it, but there's no way to verify it. There's no way to buy into it. And basically the leaderboard just shows you the different parties that are stakeholders within a particular ecosystem or project. Ida Mokia said a micro social token. So absolutely, like we imagine that tokens are going to create more change in the world than what apps did with the smartphone or what websites did with the internet. Like we think that tokens are going to democratize the access to value. They're going to democratize the access to distribution, to cooperative partnerships and teamwork. So yeah, I think this can really change the world in a way which people can't even imagine. Nice question here from Edric. What do you think of a hybrid model of venture funding, a portion from traditional VC fund and another portion from community tokens? Yeah, so this is a really good question. Like how are we going to shift from, you know, the traditional security equity world with, you know, very long shareholder agreements and term sheets and very slow, and, you know, people who are like 8 people who control, you know, tens of billions of dollars deciding where it should be allocated, to move to one where it's much more distributed and communities, customers, employees can have a peace of mind. So we think that in the future, everything's going to move towards tokens, but it's going to take a number of case studies and success cases. But in the future, you know, if you had a project and a fund wanted to invest in you, if you don't have a token, they wouldn't want to invest in you, because, you know, the way funds work at the moment is you invest in a company and you hope that this company makes so much money that it doesn't matter that 9 or 10 or 15 of your companies fail, because that one big one would pay off the whole fund. And the cool thing about tokens is you don't have to wait for that company to get acquired or go on the stock exchange, go public. You can see in real time what they're worth. So basically it is a much better way. So I guess to answer your question, what do you think of a hybrid way? So I think it definitely makes sense. The issue though with a hybrid model of tokens and VC or equity is it's a bit confusing, in the sense that it's like trying to launch an e-commerce business and a retail business. You know, most people who launch retail businesses and e-commerce business will end up just focusing on one. And we think that if you did run a retail business, you would probably make an online business and realize that your retail business is not as good as your e-commerce business. So we think that traditional ownership structures, securities, shares will move towards tokens, and they'll realize that the previous model is broken. So it'll be a natural transition across. Nice question from Adrian. What catalyst or event will help to exponentially scale your vision for Unit and the crypto space in general? That's a great question. So I think one thing that will catalyze it is the idea of projects not being based on just speculative value. So I think this concept with the treasury is so groundbreaking, because when we see the next generation of tokens and cryptocurrencies and projects involve a treasury, it's going to make the previous generation of tokens look heavily overvalued, broken in fundamentals, and it's going to allow these younger treasury-backed tokens to become more successful. That's going to be a huge catalyst and event. Another one is people realizing that, you know, tokens can be applied towards anything. So, you know, I spoke with one of the heads of the Ethereum Foundation in 2017, and I said, hey, what do you think about, you know, there being millions of tokens in the world? Or like, I was completely convinced. You know, I was like, yeah, isn't it cool that, you know, there's going to be millions of tokens in the future? And he found it confusing. He's a friend for many years. He was the first person to know about Ethereum. He was roommates with Vitalik at University of Waterloo, and he said, wow, it's kind of weird, like, to think about, you know, that there's going to be millions of tokens. And I said, you know, the idea of Bitcoin as the single cryptocurrency is too centralized, or the idea of Ethereum, you know, people saying, hey, why are you building your own coin? Why don't you just build on Ethereum? It's too centralized. You know, you need very specific tokens to represent the value that each thing is creating. So after 2017, you know, a lot of people said, hey, let's create tokens for very specific use. And I think that's going to be a huge catalyst when people realize that, you know, the first thing that they do when they have an idea or a concept or a project or community is to create a token and then build on top of this token. And it gives a really sound-based build on. Also, another nice catalyst or event, I think, is the conferences that we're organizing. So similar to how, you know, the World Economic Forum started 50 years ago, and it was just a bunch of friends who went to the together, who happened to be running the world, and now it's grown to be the conference which is running the world, or the people who basically pull strings in the world. The Founders Forum, which I used to work for in London in 2015, started in 2005 with 60 people who are top founders, and now it's grown to be the leading founder community in the world. So we think that one thing that will catalyze our ecosystem is going to be the unit conferences that we organize. So in the coming months and the coming years, we're organizing very specific forums for entire industries and entire cities, and basically bring together the leading innovators, entrepreneurs, investors, thought leaders for these various cities and industries. And we think that this is going to start off like a seed, and grow like to a small plant, but then it's going to grow to a tree and really give an opportunity for people to thrive and get opportunities for people who might not otherwise have them. Question from Ida: will there be a governance token? I'm assuming that there is some form of governance to the ecosystem. Absolutely. So one nice feature of Unit is the polls feature. The idea that anyone who holds a token can create a poll and have the other token holders vote on it in a transparent way, so that if you're running a school or running a community, you can basically ask a question to your token holders and basically the data in a very transparent and fair way, so that basically companies have a responsibility to deliver shareholder value. We think that in the future, the shareholders are going to be the customers, they're going to be the employees, they're going to be the founders, the investors. So it's basically to deliver maximum value, not necessarily monetary, but value to everyone. And yes, so I guess to answer your question, we do have, every token has a governance token, including the Unit token. And the cool thing about the Unit ecosystem or the Unit token is that we plan, similar to Bitcoin, we want to have as little governance as possible, in the sense that as an infrastructure, we don't want to be pointed at direction we see fit, but really allowed in a way which works for everyone. Question from Yip: what's been a challenging moment in your entrepreneurial journey? How do you cope with emotional difficulty? And how do you not lose the drive when you face difficulty? That's a great question. So I think, the most important thing for me when faced adversity or emotional difficulty is looking at the big picture. Several times in my life, I've experienced a low point or a situation where I felt, it's the end of the world, or this is terrible, like how can this be happening to me? And realize that, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, in the sense that, if you look on the big, like, let's say you're running a marathon, and in the first 1 kilometer, you trip over and fall, you still have, 41 kilometers to go. So like in the grand scheme of things, you still have a long journey. So let's say you miss one water stop, maybe it's better than tripping. There's still lots of water stops to go. So I guess, how have I not lose drive or face difficulty is just realize, this vision that I'm working on, I believe in so much, and I'm working with extremely talented people who I really enjoy spending time with and working with, and realizing that it's worthwhile. And I think also a nice thing too is being appreciated. I think the idea that, feeling that my work is appreciated by others and appreciating other people's work goes a long way. Like when I was working at the Founders Forum, the head of the organization didn't really treat people that well. So I rebuilt a lot of their systems, and I was working on one of the projects, which was one of the most successful projects of the Founders Factory, Founders Forum at the time. And the head of the Founders Factory, Henry, basically referred to the project as a pet project, and it was just really really demoralizing. The idea that I worked on something which was really I spent a lot of time in, I really believed in, and it was used by almost everyone in the community, and it was just a bit condescending. And I think it's so important to value people's work and really appreciate what people have done. Question for point here from Ida: the hybrid model marriage with a token launch, which is different, sounds like a DAO SPAC to me. Yeah, so it is a little bit. So it's like a holding company. It basically, you can think of tokens as a immutable, trustless way of valuing something. So the issue with regulators, the issue with stock exchanges, the issue of auditors like Pricewaterhouse, PwC, or or the big four auditors, is they're supposed to be the ones where they put a stamp on something, you've done the audits, they can't go wrong. But then, you end up with a scenario like if you heard of Wirecard, it's one of the big tech poster childs of Germany. Everyone thought, German tech is strong because of companies like Wirecard, valued at tens of billions of dollars. And then they ended up having $2 billion missing. So the auditors said, they have $2 billion, and it was just a Photoshop document, and they even hired actors to trick the auditors. So it's kind of ridiculous, but that's what happens. Like when you have a world or a system where it's possible to beat the system, then people will beat the system. And I guess the nice thing about Unit and tokens is it's just not possible. Like, this concept of a treasury basically doesn't allow people to fake the system. It's either in the treasury or it's not in the treasury. And also the idea of liquidity. So we have, a really cool feature like Uniswap or SushiSwap or PancakeSwap, where people can trade or exchange or stake the tokens. And we really love this idea of a very liquid economy. Like the idea that, if you look at most of the money in the world, or most of the value, if you look at the Forbes list, most of this money doesn't actually exist. So, Jeff Bezos, who's valued at hundreds of billions of dollars, most of that money he can't spend tomorrow. He still needs to sell his Amazon stock, or he still needs to get a loan against his Amazon stock to buy things or to use. And the nice thing about the token economy, it basically allows value to move much more fluidly without central actors. Natalia, how do you imagine governance systems of the future and the shift in global border systems? So really good question. So we, with regards to the global border system, we think that, the idea of nation states are relatively new. So I was born in Singapore, that's only 50 something years old. The United States is 280 years old. I guess if you look at Europe, it's a bit older, Germany, the United Kingdom, France, these goes back, a few hundred or maybe 1,000 plus years, but it's not very, it's not been around for that long, in the sense that, these things can change really quickly. And if you take a macro perspective, if you're into space and you look down on the Earth, there are no imaginary border lines. These are basically groups of people who've decided, like, okay, we're gonna create these territories, we're gonna create a money system and an army and a security force to govern this imaginary border piece of land. And we're going to tell people that we're going to give them a piece of paper, and this is what's going to represent their identity. And we think that, at the moment, you can't just create a country and be one of the 200 countries. Even if you have lots of money and you're very powerful like Google, you can't start issuing Google passports, or you can't issue Facebook passports and create your own country. But we think that this is going to become commoditized. It's going to be leapfrog. Like the idea of the nation state, the reason why governments are so powerful is because they control money and they control the military and they control, law. They have a monopoly on law. And we think that, this is going to change in the coming years. And we think that tokens are going to be a catalyst towards it, because what's going to happen is, as you've seen this year and last year, people are losing confidence in the banking system, they're losing confidence in the governance system, the government and governance system. The political system is very broken. And why it's broken, if you think of, governments and countries and religions and charities and businesses is more or less the same thing, and communities, they're kind of the same things. The groups of people, some have money, some have shares, some have ideas, some have rules, but they're all fundamentally groups of people, some with more power, more money, more assets than others. And if you tokenize all of it, then it allows you to very closely compare each one. The same way, if you have a website for a country and you've got a website for a charity and a website for a religion, you can kind of compare the websites. Some have more pages, some have less pages, some have faster speed, some have slower speed. If you tokenize everything, then it allows you to really choose more effectively what represents you. And yeah, we're really excited for this shift. Okay, a follow-up on my question: will entrepreneurs need to educate most VCs today to invest via tokens? The dilemma here is we know some VCs who already have a big fund that can invest in us. Well, we're not sure if we can get enough funding through community tokens. So that's a great question. It's very similar to if you go into YouTube and you try to search up Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, or people who launched internet companies in the 90s, and they were trying to convince people that the internet is the future. The internet companies don't make money, they don't have business models, but it's the future. So a lot of investors were very skeptical. They were like, okay, is this internet thing real? And then the dot-com bubble burst, meaning that all the internet companies dropped in value, and everyone said the internet was a scam. But the technology just proved far superior. So I think you know, if you had the choice to use tokens or not use tokens, I would highly recommend use tokens. Build it on Unit, because I like, we're probably the most advanced token building platform with the features that we have and the transparency that we offer. And we're built on this this underlying blockchain builder called Polkadot, which is also the most advanced blockchain network. Because in the future, everything's going to be token driven. Like it's basically using technology as a piece of paper. You know, you prefer something which is technology driven. Okay, question from Enrico. What about Unit in sub-Saharan Africa? For example, in Burkina Faso, 2/3 of people are still literate. There's no public schooling system in many countries, no money, tax flow, plus the French African franc is still a strong colonial arm. So that's a great point. Like what's going to happen to, you know, not just sub-Saharan Africa, but a small village in rural France, you know, or small town in Indonesia or South America. Like how can tokens play a role there? So the interesting thing about, you know, how the current economic system works is unless you have a registered company in a sound jurisdiction, like, you know, the United States, United Kingdom, Hong Kong, Singapore, some parts of Western Europe, maybe Dubai or UAE, but still I don't think it's there, but mostly like these 5 or like 7, maybe Switzerland and a few others, people won't invest in your company. So if it's like if you're a company registered in Indonesia, you know, where I'm at, or a company registered in Brazil, you know, the legal system is just not strong enough, and I'm sure that includes Burkina Faso. So tokens basically allow for these jurisdictions, like you've seen in El Salvador, to use this decentralized trusted system to create tokens or create entities which are investable, and make a system where you don't have to trust a legal system. You know, you don't have to have the money to hire lawyers to use the legal system, and it basically creates an incentive to invest in smaller cities or countries like Burkina Faso or rural India or Indonesia or Southeast Asia or South America, because there's more room for growth. You know, if you invest into something in a big city like New York or London or Los Angeles or Switzerland or Hong Kong, it's already so big. Like you're going to need a lot of money to set up something. But in a more emerging market, you know, if you create a token, you know, let's say if someone is a farmer and he only needs $50, you know, to buy some land and buy some seeds to get his farm growing, you know, 5 people can chip in $10 and you've just changed someone's life. And now he has the money to buy the seeds, to buy the land, to buy the equipment, to produce crops, to feed his village. And then he's going to sell his crops to his village and offer you a return for the money that you've invested in him. So it's much easier for you to, I guess, invest in impact and support many more people in emerging markets than ones where they are much more established. And I guess here, another point in this question is the lack of schooling system, or the fact that it's illiterate. So we think that, you know, the same way the mobile phone has commoditized communication, the internet has commoditized access to information, we think that the tokens are going to commoditize access to money and value. And this is going to basically allow many people to become entrepreneurs, creators, and allow them to launch projects that they otherwise would not get funded. And then, you know, if someone wants to launch in Burkina Faso or anywhere around the world, they would have the opportunities and resources to do so when they otherwise wouldn't. Point here from Yip, A16Z is doing great work here and just launched a new $2.2 billion crypto fund. Money follows money. So Andreessen Horowitz, they're one of the leaders in venture capital in the crypto, blockchain, and decentralized movement. They have a really good program called Startup School. I highly recommend everyone to listen to it. It's part of our program on the Unit Masters documentation. Could you please, question from Delphine, could you please elaborate more about the treasury? Absolutely. So how the treasury works. So we have this concept called a bank, and we have a concept called a treasury. So the bank is basically what you as the token creator have access to when you sell your tokens. Let's say you have 100 Delphine tokens, and you sell 10 of those tokens for $10. Now this $10 goes into your bank, and you can use it, to let's say you're a musician, you can use it to pay for equipment, you can use it to travel, you can use it to do whatever. And then let's say you grew this $10 to $100. Those 10 token holders, now that $10 now worth $100. But the big problem with the crypto space is, there is no legal system. It's based on trusting people that, you know, they're going to use the funds well. But what happened in 2017 is people raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and they just spend this money on personal expenses, or on expensive cars, or on traveling, or on yeah, they just blew the money basically. And that's why we introduced the idea of a treasury, because this basically allows a project which has done financially well, you know, its bank has grown much bigger because it's, you know, creates a lot of economic value, to move some of those funds into a treasury where the token holders basically feel secured. They know that, okay, if I hold 10 Delphine tokens and there's $100 in the treasury, in the worst case scenario, if Delphine disappears, if nobody wants to buy my token, my Delphine token, at least I own 10% of that $100 in the treasury. So it's quite a fundamentally simple idea, but it's revolutionary in the sense that, you know, if you looked at, you know, CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko, at the top tokens, which are, you know, traded at tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, or tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, all of this is speculative value, meaning that if you held, you know, $100,000 of a particular token, and tomorrow nobody wanted to buy that token from you, it would effectively be worth zero. There is no idea of a treasury or a floor price. It would just drop from wherever it is to zero. So the cool thing about treasury is it provides basically some form of fundamentals and a safety net by which tokens can be valued and then grow sustainably. A question here from Imran: what exchanges will you be listed on? So we have our own exchange, our Unit exchange. We have a plan to be listed on all the decentralized exchanges, and we have, you know, really strong relationships with many of the top exchanges. The co-founders of it, or the top execs of the biggest exchanges, happen to be our advisors or friends. So I think in the future, you know, we are excited to list on these major exchanges, but we don't want to do it prematurely, in the sense that, you know, we've put in, you know, lots and lots of work to build our community, to build these, to build the strong foundation to build on. And moving forward in the future, we want to make sure that, you know, when we do list on big exchanges, you know, we're at a stage where if we were to grow, you know, to be a $5 billion market cap project, we have the amount of value in our ecosystem and in our fundamentals to back up that price. Otherwise, we believe that we will end up in a situation where most cryptocurrencies exist at the moment, where, you know, they could be trading at, you know, 5, 10, 15, $20 billion, and they're panicking because they're nowhere near that valuation. So in terms of fundamentals, so their only way is to keep like keep the speculative trading high and try to build up some form of fundamentals, but it's just really hard to do. So that's why we believe that this concept of the treasury is so new, and nobody else can implement it with our protocols at the moment, because at the moment, let's say something like Ethereum, which has, you know, $200 billion valuation, creates a treasury. Their treasury is going to be close to zero, like 0%. It's like if they had a 1% treasury, that means they had $2 billion, and the Ethereum Foundation has nowhere near $2 billion in value, and it would just mean that people are buying 99% of speculative value. And we think that yeah, we believe this will be the norm, and we want to pioneer that. Kat has a question here: how Unit operates, and what's your stand on decentralized organizations? Yep, so Unit operates as a decentralized organization. You know, we do have a founding team, which is sort of seeding the idea and the technology and the community. But how we plan to operate in the future is where, you know, even if our core team was to try to play an active role, it just would not be possible, in the sense that, you know, if let's say you created a new language which is better than the English language, or a new sport, and you started telling people to play the sport, and they started playing it, and you tell people to speak this language and they started speaking it, you can't tomorrow tell them, hey, stop speaking this language. You know, you can't tell them tomorrow you're not allowed to play my sport, because it's just like just how the way decentralized organizations work, where it's just not possible for a single entity, even though they co-founded it, to stop such a movement. Question from Anchor: with the concept of tokenization, can you actually create a decentralized country with a worldwide footprint? Effectively, we believe we can, and we think that the way tokens and the token economy works, it actually is highly advantageous compared to a traditional country. The reason why is because with a traditional country, you know, it's very slow. It has a lot of overhead. The cool thing about a token is it doesn't have this baggage. You know, it's able to start afresh. It might not even have any cost, no operating payroll. It might not have any assets that it needs to manage. It might not have, you know, many different parties which are, or an election cycle where, you know, if the people doesn't like certain way things are done, all of it gets scrapped and moved on. So we think that, you know, how we're building decentralized token economy is going to be the future. It's just a matter of time improving a few successful ones. So if you look at Bitcoin as a decentralized country or decentralized economy, it's grown to be one of the biggest economies in the world in a relatively short period of time, you know, 10 years. And no other nation state could have done this. You know, if a new country emerged, it would have been very tough. Like even Singapore, you know, which is 50 years old, which is, you know, a really strong economic power, it probably would be quite tough to replicate something like that now without the use of tokens. A question from Petra, and we're just running on time now. Do you think the people around World Economic Forum would allow this to happen, like giving away the whole power they gained over the last century? So this is a great one. Like Petra was asking, will the people in power, will the people at the World Economic Forum be comfortable with tokens providing this more cooperative economy and ecosystem? So what we believe is that with tokens, it's not going to take money away from the rich and give it to the poor, like, you know, what Robin Hood kind of promised. It's going to make the rich richer and pull everyone else up, and it's going to, you know, change the motivation of people. So, you know, currently in the world, a lot of people seek money, they seek power, they seek fame. We think that a lot of these things are going to disappear. So it's kind of like, you know, you go to a restaurant now, there's nobody typically who orders 15 plates of food because they're worried about food, you know, but a lot of people, even people with a lot of money, are worried about not having enough money because that's just how the world works. It doesn't flow around as freely. There's a huge shortage of it in many places amongst many people. And tokens basically allow it to flow much more freely and give people an opportunity to thrive. And tokens provide a really nice base for that to happen. And we believe that, you know, the powers in the world will want this to happen because they are going to gain absolutely and allow everyone relatively to benefit too. A question here from me, building up on Kat's question, what are the most important leadership values for you as a co-founder of the Unit community? How do they get reflected in everyday Unit operations? That's a really good question. So like important leadership qualities and values. So I think a really strong one is communication. So this is something I'm working hard on. The idea that, you know, people can't read your mind and you need to effectively communicate and make sure that, you know, if you believe in something, you know, you need to communicate it effectively so that people can understand why you or myself or anyone believes a certain way. Because the moment you start assuming that people can read your mind or see your perspective, is they might jump to conclusion. They might think that you don't know what you're doing. They might think that they just get a bit lost. So I think super important as a leader to communicate extremely effectively. And what that means is, you know, don't overcomplicate things, keep things relatively simple and keep things to a few concepts or ideas and just focus on those and do it really well. Another leadership quality that's really important for me is the idea of realizing that things take time, in the sense that, you know, if you try to launch a video conferencing app or like a video streaming app like YouTube in 1997, you know, you're just way too early. Like, you know, the internet doesn't have a fast enough speed. You can't store so many videos. People didn't even have cameras to record the videos. So you just need to be ready for a future when, you know, the people are ready for what you have to offer. So what else? Important leadership, I think appreciating people. So being really grateful and appreciative. Also not being like a dictator. So realizing that, you know, the future is one where it's cooperative and everyone deserves a recognition or are instrumental for like something becoming successful. One big thing that I noticed while working at the Founders Forum is many of the top founders in the world have a status where, you know, without them, you know, this particular thing wouldn't have been possible. And they deserve all the credit for what they've created. And also really interesting is the title of a founder or co-founder. So a lot of people have, you know, a really big ego where they won't even allow a founder or co-founder title to anyone more than, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 people. And I think this is going to change in the future, because what you'll find in organizations is that, you know, it's not just the few people that are integral for it to succeed. It's really like all of the ingredients. So if you try to make a particular piece of food like a cake or a dish and you forget one ingredient, it's going to taste a bit off, you know. So same way with companies, organizations, communities, it really requires all of the parts. Question here from Anne. how can someone who's passionate about a specific industry or city or unit get involved with a unit industry city team? So the best way to get involved is to reach out to one of our co-founders or one of our team members. And in doing so, like, we're working on building each of our industry and city teams. So, regardless of whichever city you're in the world, we need lots of help in building up communities in each of them and introducing people to the idea of the token economy, and then helping people to build successful case studies around a particular token. Imra here at Simplex, we can introduce you to top exchanges and we can list your coin too as well. Cool, yeah, that's awesome. Simplex is a really cool application. It's a really strong on-ramp. It recently got acquired. It's really based, and really big congratulations to the team who've done an exceptional job in bringing people who might not know a lot about crypto or funds into the crypto space. So yeah, thank you, Imra. Please reach out. About presenting this as a new tax system where people could decide what tax is put. Yep, that's a great way to view Caroline. So I guess with Unit and the token economy, we think that this will supersede the tax system. Like, we think that in the next coming 5 to 10 years, and it might seem like a tight timeline, we think that in the next 5 to 10 years, the idea of taxes or the idea of government is going to be fundamentally different. Like, the idea of the European Union is very big, right? And then underneath the European Union, you've got countries. And then underneath countries, you have towns, and then or cities. And underneath towns, you've got regions of a town. And we think that even a town is too big. Like, we think that a building or a restaurant or a gym, that is a more suitable size government. So that's how we think the future of governments or tax systems will look like. Yeah, so yeah, I guess can wrap up now. There's a few more interesting questions here, but thank you so much everyone for your time, and looking forward to more sessions in the future. And thank you so much.